Hey, greetings, everyone. Lieutenant Colonel Allen West here, the Executive Director of the American Constitutional Rights Union, and welcome to another episode of Live Free TV. If we're to live free in the United States of America, that means that we have to have a system of integrity for our electoral processes and elections. And I think that's one of the big current concerns that I hear and I see going across the country. We have talked about how we've got to have more poll watchers and poll workers and election judges and things of this nature. But there's something out there that the progressive socialist left and kind of tricking some Republicans into this supporting is a thing called ranked choice voting. We've had a segment that talked about ranked choice voting before, but we wanted to get an opportunity to talk to someone that is on the ground in Alaska that can tell us about some of the pitfalls, the shortcomings and failures that he has seen with ranked choice voting and why he's speaking out about that. We're joined today by Phil Izon, who in the financial sector, Phil climbed the ranks from a teller to positions like banker and mortgage loan officer at respective establishments such as KeyBank and Wells Fargo. His commitment to financial literacy shown when he collaborated with the University of Alaska and Wells Fargo to create a course for college students. As he transitioned from finance, Phil ventured into marketing and business consultation, guiding U.S. clients through complex industry landscapes, including scientists at NASA JPL and even former Governor Sarah Palin. He now leads SealCam.ai, a pioneering American AI firm concentrating on computer vision technology, while also driving the movement to repeal ranked choice voting in Alaska, having crafted the bill awaiting a November 2024 ballot decision. Additionally, Phil's expertise about ranked choice voting has been sought after nationally. In 2003 alone, he presented to congressional members, state legislators, 5 secretaries of state, and vast audiences spanning 12 states, including places like Washington, D.C., Florida, Missouri, Arizona, and Hawaii. Phil Izon, welcome to Live Free TV.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Let's talk about this whole thing, ranked choice voting. Where did this come from? I mean, we've heard about the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact was a means by which the left is seeking to undermine the Electoral College. When was this ranked choice voting first mentioned, brought about, and how was it able to get into the system there in Alaska?
Ranked choice voting has been around for a very long time. Actually, it's been used in places like Australia for upwards of 100 years now. In the United States, it's been tested periodically here and there, about 85 different times in various local communities. The most prominent use of ranked choice voting, as the name ranked choice voting in the United States, is San Francisco. That started in 2002. First use case was 2004, and so, but the initiative drive was in 2002. And a lot of the concerns that were brought up at that time for San Francisco are still concerns that I have today. So even 20 years have gone by. A lot of the things they bring up about ranked choice voting, my initial concerns when I first started this process, and were. They say it would get better, in Alaska specifically, it would get better over time. And, Alaskans will get better understanding of how the system works and they won't make mistakes and whatnot. And so, but if you look at San Francisco and Oakland, they've been using the system for, over, upwards of 20 years and some places longer. And those issues are still prevalent. And so I don't believe that this is a voter issue. I believe this is a system issue. And it doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat or progressive or libertarian. This system doesn't really help anybody. And it makes it more confusing for everyone. And it makes it harder to vote, makes it more confusing to vote. The ballots are more complex, which automatically from the very beginning makes the system not nearly as good as our current system, traditional plurality voting, which makes sense. And even young children understand it. So that's another big piece of it. So, but I want to talk a little bit about why I started it and why I decided I wanted to write the repeal. And so I actually did that in my living room. I wrote a bill and got it approved. So I'm not a lawyer and I've never done anything like that before. But it was because I received a phone call from my grandfather. And he had notated that he had a hard time understanding the ballot. a ranked choice ballot in Alaska. And my grandfather used to run a multi-million-dollar construction company in Alaska. It was his company, and he started from scratch. So he's a pretty smart guy. Even today, he's very, very. He's dealt with some cancer issues, and he had cancer at the time of that. I didn't know that, but it just made me very emboldened to step in and help. And if my granddad was struggling with this system, then I assumed that there were, thousands, tens of thousands of maybe, there's 200,000 voters in Alaska. So potentially hundreds of thousands of voters could have been impacted, negatively by the system.
Mhm.
So do you have any questions about like kind of the initial launch of this? And then I can go into a little bit of why, where it went from there, but
Yeah.
just
Well,
on
that's
Alaska
that's what I
side.
want to get. That's what I want to get to because one of the things that I've read, the advocates of ranked choice
Mhm,
voting says that it takes away the partisanship and it
mhm.
kind of levels a playing field and it allows people to not get into their respective stovepipes and circles. But from this basic understanding, can you just describe to the voters what the folks in Alaska and the confusion that your grandfather saw with this whole ranked choice voting issue?
Yeah. So when you first, for one, from the very beginning, you had the system was modified, with very, very little education, like to the voters. And so you're going from a system that every single person in the United States, for the most part, have used since they were young children, a plurality style voting system. To moving to like a ranked system, and with the lack of education, a lot of people were walking in the ballots, and we heard from poll watchers. I've heard from people that worked in the voting booths that they saw like 10 or 15% of ballot error issues at least, and that's what their estimate was people filling out the ballot incorrectly. Each individual voter had like upwards of 3 ballots to use because potential issues with ranked choice, and a lot of people did use those extra ballots because of the making errors. And when I'm sort of going into that, that's the question is like, how complex are these ballots? Well, here in the United States with ranked choice, it started out with like jungle primary, and so that's an
Mhm.
Alaska situation. So you do a big jungle primary, and that could have upwards of 50 people on it, like very similar to California. And Larry Elder and many other people that should be most likely the governor of California aren't, because of systems like that with jungle primary. And Gavin Newsom using that as a recall method to stop him essentially from being recalled. It allows people to manipulate the vote with the open primary. They call it open primary. It's really a jungle primary. And so it starts there. That's confusing by itself. Trying to learn about 50 candidates is very complicated. You can't expect Joe Schmo and the guy down the street and a little old lady to learn about 50 individual candidates to figure out who they want to vote for. And so they vote for one person in a jungle primary. And then from there, it moves into a general. And so, depending upon who is which system you're using. So in California, there's a top 2 ranked choice voting system. In Alaska, it's a top 4 ranked choice voting system. And in the Wisconsin, currently they're promoting top 5 ranked choice voting. I believe in Nevada, it's like top 6. So it depends upon the system. And so whoever gets the most votes in that, and so you got top 2, top 4, top 5, top 6 out of the jungle primary. Those people move on to the next round of voting, which is the general. And in that election, that is when the ranked choice part actually takes place. And so just that transition from voting from one person to then voting for ranking could be confusing. Just that by itself, and then not knowing that there's going to be a difference between the two, and like from one election to the next, and so that was by itself very confusing. The delays are also they not so much just confusing, but confusing why it takes so long. Why did they do the delays after the voting? So Alaska has 200,000 voters. Yet we were last in the entire country for election results. The only state that was past us was Georgia, and that was it. And that was with the runoff for just that one race. So the pitch here is that ranked choice voting helps eliminate that runoff in the Georgia circumstance. But if you look at it, we didn't have any election results for everyone else in the country had election results. We were last in the country for all of our election results. Georgia just had one race they had to do a runoff for. So comparing those two, just there's not a reason to abandon an entire election system. So after this, after all these very long, extensive conversations with people in Alaska about their experience with it, I started looking in other places, and my questions were very simple. Is it better? Is it cheaper? Is it faster? Does it increase voter turnout? Does it help third parties? Does it eliminate spoiler candidates? Very, very basic. These are like, okay, if you're going to break down an election system, what are the main things that are your merits for that election system? Well, these are those merits. So if you look at ranked choice voting, it doesn't meet any of these requirements. It doesn't beat a plurality in any of these categories either. So it's confusing. The ballots are complex. The systems are not cohesive. They don't work together very well. There's 50 plus candidates on a jungle primary, and then you mix in the added complexity, extended period of time to get the results as well. And it's all done by computers.
So when I was reading some things out of San Francisco, Oakland, California, one of the difficulties they had was an audit trail for ranked choice voting. So if we can try to help the listeners of this segment understand. So when you get to ranked choice voting, let's say you have 5 candidates going into this phase, and you're supposed to rank all of these 5 candidates 1 through 5. Then do you have an opportunity after that to come back and revote or recast a ballot, or does someone else take over that process and you become unaware of what happens with that ranked choicing?
It's actually done by an algorithm. It's all computer based. It could technically be done by an individual. In a Virginia circumstance, Glenn Youngkin used ranked choice voting in the 2020, or I believe 2022. I don't remember exactly what year, but Glenn Youngkin's election and the Republican primary because of COVID. So I think it was 2020 election, but they had used ranked choice voting and they hand counted the ranked choice voting tabulation. And from the inside knowledge of that, it was a nightmare. But majority of the time when you do ranked choice voting, it is with a computer algorithm. So the computer automatically captures your choices, supposedly, and then retabulates that later. And so issue with this and this tabulation and all this stuff that they do is that, one, it's all done by computers, so there's no human involvement. 2, like you said, there's no audit trail. So I actually went to the Division of Elections in Alaska and sat down getting my petition books and other things. And I had asked about the auditing ability for ranked choice. And so they said that they do a 5% count verification essentially of every district in the first round. And so in the first round, they go around to every district and they take 5% of the ballots and they kind of just make sure that they're accurate. I'm not sure exactly what the process looks like. I haven't been involved in that, but that's what they said. But in the second and third round and beyond of ranked choice voting, they cannot audit and they cannot hand count those ballots and tabulate that. So there's no way to verify. The only way to verify ranked choice voting results is by using the ranked choice voting system.
And of course, again, when you go through those subsequent iterations, it's a computer algorithm, as you just said. There's no human interaction. So now all of a sudden, because it was used in Alaska, and the only other major state that uses ranked choice voting, I believe, is Maine. I've heard a lot of people in Alaska not happy with that. And so what drove you to get into your living room there and decide to write a piece of legislation, which, like you said, we need more everyday average people writing legislation, not the 3,000 pages, which comes from a lot of these lawyers, but to write a piece of legislation to repeal it? What was the impetus behind that? And what are some of the key things that you mentioned in your legislation as to why it needs to be repealed?
I don't believe it's clear. I believe that the original passage, the original getting this law passed, originally they wrote the ballot. It was a ballot initiative, and they'll use the same process. They've been using the same kind of cookie cutter process throughout the country. And so first I want to just talk a little bit about the background of who's funding ranked choice. So it's a George Soros project. It's funded by groups like Arabella Advisors. It's
Hmm.
funded by Fair Vote and Fair Vote Action, Represent Us, Unite America, Ranked Choice Resource Center. All these are like little spinoffs of Arabella Advisors, in my opinion, and they get ample amount of funding. Millions, probably hundreds of millions of dollars to ultimately push this on people. And two examples. One, I'm currently working on the ranked choice voting repeal effort in Minnetonka, Minnesota. And I'm also working on the ranked choice voting repeal in Alaska. But in Minnetonka, they Fair Vote dumped $140,000 in this tiny little town to get ranked choice voting during COVID, and they got it. And the local citizens only had 4,000 to defend themselves. And in Alaska, they spent 7 million, and the local Alaskans only had 600,000. So they're getting out spent 10 to 1 or plus, more than 10 to 1 every time. And so just knowing where that comes from, where this system started from, where the money comes from to keep it going too, is there's something for people to know and pay attention to. But as you move through the ranked choice voting system, the rounds, the 1 and 2s, so you get through those, you get into a thing called exhausted ballots. And it's something that I want people to be very clear of and very understanding of. I've done lots of presentations, and one of the very first questions is, do you know what exhausted ballots are? And even people that are in Alaska that have used this system don't know what that is. And so exhausted ballots means that you've selected someone on your candidate list who is no longer in the running. And so they've eliminated that candidate. And so because of that, your vote has now actually not only been eliminated along with the candidate, but actually taken out of the entire results. So as if you never voted.
Yeah.
And so these are the reasons why I decided to jump in and repeal ranked choice, is learning about those underlying areas and specifically who's funding it. And when you look at who's funding it, that was one of the biggest things that made me realize that the system's not good. And then, of course, my interaction with my grandfather was the final icing on the cake of the whole thing. And there's a lot of Alaskans that are very upset. Absolutely, travel all over the state, and we've had over 700 volunteers. We do not pay. We just recently started paying for signature gathering because we're towards the end of our thing. But up until this point, we haven't paid anybody to do signature gathering. It's been all volunteer, and we had over 700 of them. So really impressive Alaskans, but again, they're not happy with the system, not at all.
Now, as I read, this ballot initiative, this bill that you have presented, is not going to be voted on until next November 2024, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, it's the earliest I could get it on the ballot.
So what is going to happen in the interim between now and then? Are there some local level elections? I'm sure there are primary elections, things of that nature that are going to be taking place prior to November 2024. So will ranked choice voting still be in place for the national level elections of November 2024?
For the state federal elections for the state of Alaska, they will be in place for the 2024 elections. So Mary Peltola's race is that year. And then legislative races are that year, and then the presidential, of course. So this will actually be the first I think this will be the first time ranked choice voting's ever been used in a presidential election ever. I don't think they use it in Maine for that. So this may be next year, maybe the first time they do that in Alaska. Who knows? Alaska might go to Joe Biden because of it. I mean,
yeah.
you never really. How this
we saw
works.
what happened. We saw what happened in your congressional election, where Sarah 60%. Palin lost. Yeah, because of the ranked choice voting. Now, so then, from a legal perspective, is there any way that you can have, because of this ballot initiative, that you can have a stay on ranked choice voting until after the November 2024 election?
I don't believe so. It's been challenged constitutionally, and the Constitution can be modified by citizens, and so that's the argument. So by doing a citizens initiative, and going through that process, and the legal department finding it legal, just like they did with ours and all that, it creates a massive barrier to try to unwind. There's only two ways in Alaska to unwind it: either do a citizens initiative process again, or the legislature can repeal it after 2 years. Our legislature is incredibly weak. We have only the House is mostly Republicans, some really good guys and people in there. The Senate is majority Democratic and rhinos. There's not too many like good quality senators in our Alaska Senate, and so they can't get a bill. They tried to do a bill to repeal ranked choice, and they can't get it through the Senate, and that's what the message has been to me so far. So at this point, the only path to get it eliminated is through the citizens initiative process, which is what I started.
How does the governor of Alaska stand on this? You have a Republican governor there.
I gave him the option to sign to repeal it, and he said he wanted to remain neutral. So I don't know. I he won his election with ranked choice this last time, so maybe he likes it. I'm not sure.
Well, that tells you everything.
Well, it does. It tells you a lot about individuals. Anybody that's a Republican that advocates for ranked choice voting is either ignorant or complicit. That's
and we know that your Senator Lisa Murkowski was supportive of the ranked choice voting as well.
She was complicit. She was not. She was. Her staffers were involved in writing the ranked choice voting language. So when they originally got ranked choice voting, her attorney, former chief of staff for Governor Walker, Democrat Governor Walker, was the guy that wrote the bill initially for ranked choice voting. And he made it very confusing. Like, that was one of the things I want to point out to you is, like, when you write legislation, you should write it very clearly. And initially, so when I wrote mine was very clear. And the whole point was my Honest Elections, Alaskans for Honest Elections, which is the project in Alaska, wasn't saying the elections were not honest. It was saying that the group that did the ranked choice voting thing was not honest. They had wrote a bill that had mostly focused on dark money and removing dark money. And it was so focused on dark money that the initial bill, when they applied, got rejected. And so the Department of Law said, no, you can't do that. You're only allowed one subject for a citizens initiative. And they had like 5 subjects in their thing. And the reason why they do that is to limit how much, because your actual summary on the front, like when you do voting, it can only be so long. And so they limit the one subject rule so that way you don't have too much stuff in there and that people know what they're voting on. Well, they challenged that all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court of Alaska determined that that was all election related. And so they let it go through. Well, I'll give you another thing here about the Supreme Court of Alaska in a second. But so they went through, and then they got it, and they barely passed by less than 1%. Less than 1% it passed, and it was never audited. So we have no actual proof that it actually ever passed or not. And so I feel very confident putting this out in front of Alaskans and giving them a chance to vote on it again. This time, though, we wrote it very clearly. It's just specifically about ranked choice. We didn't include any dark money, anything. We let them keep all that language and let them have that, because we believe that was a poison pill. We believe that they put that there to try to stop us. They were going to advertise saying we're trying to bring dark money back to Alaska, and which obviously is a joke, because 99% of their money for their effort came from out-of-state sources. 99%. So out of their $7 million, they only raised $20,000 from Alaska. Going into the Supreme Court real quick, last year in that race with Sarah Palin, Al Gross, Nick Begich, and Mary Peltola, this Alaska Supreme Court, this was the Supreme Court that determined this, not anybody else. And they're liberal for the most part. They determined that the Division of Elections actually violated state law by removing Al Gross from the ballot after the deadline. So he dropped out after the deadline, and then they removed his name anyway. And then when they did that, they violated state law, which gave Mary a huge leg up because she was in 4th place. And so if you rewind and you kept Al Gross on the ballot, he gets 3rd place, Mary gets 4th, she gets eliminated. Al Gross gets eliminated, then whoever is our representative is actually down to Nick Begich or Sarah Palin.
And we know that the person who would have been 4th is now your member of Congress. That's
right. Yeah, that's a repeat of a very common thing you see in ranked choice. You see the people that are in 3rd place ultimately getting winning. It's a reoccurring theme with ranked choice voting, where you don't want to be 1st or 2nd when your initial results come out. You want to be in 3rd. That's the main. I've heard that from people before, and I've seen news articles written in Oakland and other places about that same strategy. So it's because you're wanting to get someone's seconds. Whoever's in the top 1 or 2, you want to get their second voters. Yeah. And so it's just a ludicrous system. Totally
And then,
crazy.
of course, it is the algorithm that kicks in. It's not the human element that kicks in. But
Which, yeah.
I want to stress something for all of our viewers to understand. You have your Republican governor, Governor Dunleavy. You
Mhm.
have your Republican senator, Senator Murkowski,
Mhm.
who have both supported a system of elections that is funded by George Soros and
Yes,
Arabella Advisors, which
that's
is
right.
far left as you can go, and their cronies thereof. Did I get
Yeah.
that correct?
That's correct. I can't say 100% of Dunleavy's supportive, but he did not sign to repeal it. So you could say what you want with that. But
If you choose not to
Murkowski,
decide, you still have made a choice. That's from the song
I
Free
agree.
Will by
That's
Rush.
why I'm willing to call. I told everybody that I was going to call him out if they don't sign it, and so he had his opportunity. Nick Begich and Sarah Palin have both been shown support and signed the repeal. So they were competitors, and they both realized that this isn't
Yeah.
good system. So it doesn't matter. The point is like you should be able to write your name, sign your name, dedicate yourself to saying no, I'm not for this. This isn't good. And so if he's not willing to do that, then I'm more than happy to put him on spot. But going into Oakland real quick, I want to talk about the algorithm piece. So in the same year, so you remember the Division of Elections had made massive mistake removing Al Gross.
Mhm.
That impacted the election results, and so in Oakland the same year, November election, they did ranked choice voting, and it was a school board race and the mayor's race there. And so in the school board race, they supposedly and this factual, but what I mean by supposedly is that supposedly the algorithm was wrong. And so Fair Vote, who's a pro ranked choice voting group, that's like my group, Ranked Choice Education Association, but far wealthier, obviously, a lot more money, and backed by Soros, reached out to the Division of Elections in Oakland, California, and told them that they had tabulated the election results incorrectly. So a third party group had some type of power. I have no idea how they got this power, but they had enough power to actually reach out to the division in Oakland, tell them that they ran the algorithm wrong. And so initially, the school board candidate that Fair Vote sponsored lost. But then they said, no, you ran the algorithms incorrectly. You ran the tabulation grid wrong. So what I had to do was if someone voted first place, but then skipped their second place and moved to third, they were supposed to move that third up to the second, supposedly. That's what I've been told. I don't know if that's the 100% facts on that situation, but you can see how this again just leaves it open for interpretation, I guess you could say. But so Fair Vote, who's again third party, reached out to division and told them, say, no, you did this wrong. The division reran the numbers and agreed that they did it wrong. And then so they already declared someone the winner. They had to retroactively come back and say that someone else was the winner. And then that took 6 months to actually determine in court. And so those are two polar opposite examples. One, Alaska using ranked choice voting for the very first time, and the division making massive mistakes. And then you have Oakland, which has been using ranked choice voting for a long, long time, and the division also making massive mistakes that both had impacts on the results of the elections in the same year. And so I don't want to hear anybody tell me, oh, it'll get better. They're like, no, Oakland's been using a long time. And Alaska, you're talking about systems that should be easy to implement and people not make mistakes. And we have two massive, examples right here in our face that say, no, this is not good. Please don't do this to yourselves. Please.
Well, as we wrap up this interview, I would like you to give to our viewers the concise understanding as to why nationwide we should reject ranked choice voting.
There's no valid reason to use it. It doesn't benefit anyone. There's no proof it helps third party candidates. There's no proof it helps that it benefits the spoiler issue with candidates. In Sarah Palin's case with Nick Begich, and there's another case in Vermont that shows that spoiler candidates can happen with ranked choice voting. Again, it's not good for third parties. There's no evidence at all. So the pitch from the ranked choice voting groups is like, this will be help partisanship. There's actually no proof that it helps Republicans win elections either. None. So third parties don't help. aren't benefited. Republicans, there's only one Republican that has won with ranked choice voting, and that's Lisa Murkowski, which she was in charge of trying to get ranked choice voting. And most likely would have been a primaried out because of her allegiance to Biden and other Democratic principles. And so it's just all around. There's no proof to the data. There's no proof in the data that shows that what they're saying, what they're selling is true. I call it snake oil. They're snake oil salesmen. They say it'll fix every ailment with our election. It'll be better, it's quicker, it's faster, it's cheaper, it increases turnout, and none of these things are true. In Alaska's circumstance, we had the lowest voter turnout in the entire history of our state last year. Entire history of the entire state. Well, our state's pretty new, but think about that, and that's how few people showed up to vote. And I blame ranked choice voting.
Well, oftentimes when people say something is, so true and so good, chances are it is not. Phil Izon, where can people follow you and learn more information? And also, where can they download your prospective bill so that maybe they can copy this in other states?
So ALEC, so it's ALEC, is an organization that actually has a framework against ranked choice voting, and
the American Legislative Executive Council, I believe.
Yep. And so they have a great framework against ranked choice. It's far better than anything I have. And my bill's very elementary comparatively, and very long because of the amount of stuff that they use. So I would defer to ALEC for the framework on the anti-ranked choice voting. But I do have a 30-part animated video series about ranked choice voting. And I also have a 300-page book that I've written about ranked choice voting that will be available at the beginning of next year. But I'll get you an early copy. I'll send you an email, and you can have an email first edition kind of copy of it, electronic review. But there's a lot. It covers 20 years, 2 decades of history of ranked choice voting. My website is rankedchoiceedu.org. That's rankedchoiceedu.org. And then you could also follow us on Ranked Choice EDU on Twitter. It's our biggest. It's the one I do most of the work on, X. So.
Well, Phil Izon, I want to thank you because you are a living example of what Benjamin Franklin said when he told Mrs. Powell on September the 17th of 1787, it's a republic if you can keep it. And more citizens need to accept and take the responsibility of maintaining this longest running constitutional republic that the world has ever known. So thank you so much for joining us here on Live Free TV. God bless you and God be with you.
Well, thank you, sir. I look forward to meeting you someday.
That'd be great.
Yeah. Have a good one.
You too.